Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. I feel like I'm welcoming myself back to the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. My name is Art Burns, and I'm really happy to be with you. You know, I did warn you all a few months ago now when I was doing the reboot, when I started the reboot of the Showing Up to Life podcast and YouTube channel. After a year off, I was honest and I was very clear that there would be times where you wouldn't hear from me very much, and there would be other times where you hear from me a whole bunch. And I think that we've seen this play out, and these last couple of weeks have certainly fallen into the category of the former. It's nothing's wrong, nothing's bad, nothing's negative in any way, but things have been very busy and somewhat even chaotic at times. But I want to tell you that I got some really exciting things going on. It's things that I'm not ready to tell you about just yet, but they're coming, and they're really exciting. Ways in which I'm going to be able to serve more people in more ways, and I'm really excited about that. It's one little teaser I'll sort of release to you is the idea of we're going to start doing some pre-recorded sort of content that might include a membership kind of thing, and that's all I'm going to tease you with right now. But I'm super excited, and it's coming soon. So anyway, good morning to you all. At least it's morning when I'm recording this. It's actually pretty early on a Sunday morning here in Denver, which is kind of chilly. As you can see, I'm wearing my flannel shirt. It's so weird in Denver how, in the middle of August, I'm so chilly. I'm like in sweatpants and, and a flannel shirt. But in a couple hours, it'll be 90 degrees. And then later on tonight, it'll get cold again. It's so cool. I love it out here. But anyway, I woke up especially early this morning, and, all the plants have been watered. My cats and my children have all been fed, and everybody's all set. And I find myself with a couple of hours before my first meeting. So I thought, what better thing to do than to jump on and do a podcast episode? And actually, I didn't have anything planned, so this is sort of one of those impromptu episodes, which often turn out to be the most powerful episodes that we do here. So here we are. This morning, what I want to talk to you about is a quote that I read this morning. This is a quote from Carl Jung, which is Carl Jung, pardon me. It's an excerpt from an introduction that he wrote to a book called The Holy Men of India. I believe the book was written in the 40s. Maybe 50s. I don't recall. I should have looked it up. My bad. But anyway, listen to this quote. Now, first of all, please understand, because he is writing in the 40s or 50s, he's using the word men and man, but I would replace that gender specific, label with people, right? That this is not, a masculine only thing. Okay. He's not just talking about specifically men here. He's talking about humans in my opinion. So anyway, the outward lives of men could do with a lot more bettering and beautifying, but these things lose their meaning when the inner man does not keep pace with them. To be satiated with necessities is no doubt an inestimable source of happiness, yet the inner man continues to raise his claim and can be satisfied by no outward possessions. And the less this voice is heard in the chase after brilliant things of this world, the more the inner man becomes the source of inexplicable misfortune and uncomprehended unhappiness in the midst of living conditions whose outcome was expected to be entirely different. The externalization of life turns to incurable suffering because no one can understand why he should suffer from himself. I mean, good morning, right? I shared that on Facebook and with the little damn Carl with the introduction, because that's heavy. That's really heavy to sort of comprehend, but let's unpack what he's talking about there, right? And I think this is really at the root of this work that we do and what it means to show up to life, right? Because what he's talking about here is that we as people have a tendency to chase after those sort of external dreams and the sort of, way that we expected life to be. Right. So if you're, and there is a man woman kind of thing going on here that's a little bit, certainly traditionally there's been a different experience, right? Where men were there to, to get rich, where women were there to make families and, make a home and stuff like that. But I mean, of course, we've broken through a lot of that, and we need to do a lot more work in that area, right? But the point is that whether we're talking about one or the other, right, or some combination of the two, right, we have this tendency as people to chase after those sort of material things in our lives. Now, this is not something that is just a natural thing that happens, right? I mean, I think there is a natural sense to this at some level, but of course it's very much societal in the sense of, or in the context rather of advertising and marketing and movies and magazines and all this stuff that we are sort of, wrapped up in, that are constantly reminding us that we need these material things in our lives. Right? We need that new car. We need that big house. We need that, I'm going to talk like the Talking Head song, right? The beautiful house, the beautiful wife, the large automobile, right? That's what we believe, that we have this sort of innate, pressure that we put on ourselves to strive for those things. And what Carl Jung is saying in this passage, what Carl Jung is saying in this passage in such a very, very important way is that that's not all there is. That while we're searching and striving after these, material wealth and material, the shiny, beautifying objects of our lives, right? Which can be very simple. I mean, can be deceptively simple stuff, right? Like even like a fancy toaster or a fancy, alarm clock or something, right? We feel that we need to, we feel that possessing these things and obtaining these things are making life somehow more enriched. And on one level, they are, as Jung is clearly, sort of admitting, if you will, or acknowledging that there is something to that, right? I mean, I'll be honest with you, I have tastes as well. You see my guitar over there. That thing's not cheap, I love fountain pens. Those aren't cheap, right? There's I play hockey. That's not a cheap thing at all. Right. And so there's a reality to the fact that we all have this sense of, materials. Now, of course, when I say we all, I'm excluding people like, people living a monastic life, right? Where you deliberately, renounce all of your possessions. Right. And so what does that mean? Right. The monastic life is focusing entirely on that which is not the material life, right? So what Carl Jung is saying, again, back to my point, pardon me for the digression, that while we are searching for these things and striving for these things and trying to build up our life with these beautiful, shiny things in our world, there's an internal thing that needs attention and needs acknowledgement and needs to express itself. And that internal thing, what we might call spirituality or deeper meaning or authenticity even. Right? And that and I think this is a very, very important thing that is part of, again, what we're doing here with this work. Right? Because with this work, and again, the monastic life is like the furthest spectrum point of what I'm talking about, right? But as we practice mindfulness, which is just paying attention to what's happening, right? But what's happening that includes our experience within what's happening. And we notice this happening and this experience through our body, through our emotions, through the thoughts that we have and the stories that we tell ourselves. And as we do this, as we cultivate this awareness and pay attention to what is happening internally as well as, or internally in mindfulness, right? And but not just internally, of course, in the inside, but also sort of how we fit into the external world, right? And we do this with kindness and with compassion and with a loving awareness. What we're doing is we're counterbalancing this sort of striving nature that we have, and this sort of this belief or this embodied knowledge that everything is not okay the way it is, right? That we need stuff to keep getting better or fancier or bigger or what have you, right? The next job, the bigger car, the bigger house, and all that stuff, right? Because it's again, it's not that stuff is necessarily wrong. Although there's another quote that I would share with you, which is from Confucius, that says to be wealthy and respected in an unjust society is a disgrace. So we can sort of embody some of that material wealth, as long as we're doing it in a way that also contributes and acknowledges the injustice that that we're driving past people in our car with who don't have homes, right? And so that is something that has to be sort of, balanced. That's important that be balanced, right? If I'm driving past a homeless encampment with $100,000 car, which a $30,000 car would do just as well, that's another question to answer, right? But again, the whole thing that this quote of Jung, and the thing that I'm not necessarily looking to get into a social, economic, political discussion here, although I'm always ready for that, I'll talk about another great mind of this work, which is Thich Nhat Hanh, who started or sort of pioneered a version of Buddhism called engaged Buddhism. Right, which is also part of this conversation that we're having, right? That sometimes, and again, if we look at the far end of the monastic life, we might find ourselves, sort of withdrawing from the whole thing, right? Like we don't have to be part of this whole rat race of the world and the chasing of things and all that kind of stuff. And that can sort of lead to a sort of absence and a sort of unhealthy detachment from the realities of the world, right? So Thich Nhat Hanh was about using Buddhism and using the skillfulness that we derive from the practices that Buddhism prescribes in order to effectively and powerfully impact the injustices of the world. So protesting wars and although he never said he said he never marched against war, he always marched for peace. Very interesting. Anyway, I'm definitely bouncing around here on a lot of subjects. So let's rein it back in and talk about this sort of duality of this experience that we're having. And what Jung is talking about in this passage, right, is that we might, just as a monk or somebody who is sort of using their spirituality to sort of detach and bypass the world, there's another sort of portion of us that are so clinging and so attached to the material aspects of the world that we just ignore the spiritual aspects of the world. So the point is, in my opinion, is that it's not one or the other, right? It's not monastic life is good, and it's not that material life is bad. The question for me, and the question that I think that this work helps us to find, is, or the answer to this work helps us to find the answer to the question. The question is, where's the balance point, right? How much are we balanced in our moment by moment experience between the things that we need? Because even material, the material world also includes, just the simple things that we need, right? Like rent is real. So is food, so is water, so is, making sure that you have a car to be able to get to work so that you can earn the money to pay for your food and your rent and your water and your electricity and your, medicine if you need it. Although food is medicine too, right? But anyway, the whole point here, pardon me, I just had to take a sip of water. For those of you listening, wondering like what happened just now, I was just taking a sip of water. Pardon me. But the point is that if we get lost in the material world and we lose sight of that spiritual need, that spiritual acknowledgement, that acknowledgement of what is happening inside of me, to understand that part of me that is not material, well, then we get lost in it. We become unmoored, and we find ourselves in a state of suffering. Because as Dr. Jung in the very end of that thing says, how can we possibly suffer from ourselves? We are who we are. But that's the point, is that we're not allowing our authenticity when we allow this lopsided sort of, approach to our lives. That's why many people who have the most money are the ones who are suffering the most. It's easy to look at somebody who's got the big house, the big car, the job, and all that stuff and say, oh man, that looks like an easy life. Darn, I wish I had something like that. But if we look more deeply, we find that somebody who has all that, that excess in, beyond just the necessities, but the excessive, material possessions, well, they probably had to ignore that spiritual side of them in order to achieve all that wealth. And as they did that, they learned to suffer. They created suffering within themselves. Now, it's also true, again, that the monastic life, that's, again, you might look at it and you might say, oh man, I would love to live in a monastery and just not have any responsibilities and not have anything to do. Well, there's a very important reason why most people who live that way, I mean, if you live that way for 4 years, that is a lot compared to the average. Most people do that for like a year, maybe 9 months or so, right? And then they come back to the sort of quote unquote real world, right? Because that's not an easy way to live either. There's something that's not there that might feel, necessary. And we could even, we don't even have to necessarily compare it to like the monastic life, but even just to say a life in which you were, like let's say you're just sitting in your apartment and you're just focusing on your spirituality and you're not making money and you're not buying food and you're not paying the rent. Well, guess what? You're not going to be able to sustain that for very long. So that's my point, is that there is a need for both. Right? And so it's not to say like, oh man, I want to buy that new shirt that I saw in the store the other day, and that makes me bad, right? That's not the truth. The truth is that if you want that beautiful thing, that shirt that you found in the store, or that car that you saw in the magazine, or whatever it is, the idea is to, again, ask yourself, or to find it within yourself, where is this balanced with the true authentic me, right? Am I ignoring my true self just in order to get this thing that I want? And the way we can do this, of course, is to examine why. What is it that I'm really striving for? Right? Is it, am I just trying to be, to impress people? Do I just have this notion that I'm supposed to have a fancy car and a big house and a job title and a whatever it is, a membership to some club or something? Is that just an attachment that I have? Or is this something that I truly love? Is it something that's driving me from a place of that same place of authenticity and spirituality, right? Do I feel that in a deep way, or am I somehow trying to escape something? Am I trying to just sort of ease some sort of pain that I'm experiencing? Which again can be the same thing on the other side, right? Am I practicing meditation just because I want to not deal with this thing in my life, right? That's what we call spiritual bypass, which is again ignoring the material in the service of the spiritual. That is not any more sustainable or more advantageous than abandoning the spiritual for the material. It's a question of balance, and it's a question of intention. It's a question of understanding our own true intention, which there's only one person in the entire universe who can find that answer of what is your intention. And that person is you. Because there's no, right? There's no rules to this. There's no like, this is good, that's bad. That's the whole point, right? And so the idea here is that that knowing that we were all brought up in this society. I mean, all of you who are listening to this podcast have, not all of you are in the United States, but most of you are in what we might call Western countries. Not all, but most. So we were all brought up in this sort of capitalist idea. And again, I'm not trying to get too, political here, but it's true. We were all brought up with advertising. I mean, even when we were 3 years old watching our children's shows on Saturday mornings, they were slipping ads in there to us. They were programming us back then to say that there's stuff you need to get in life. You can't just live, right? And of course, this is also built into the whole scholastic experience, right? Which is, we start at kindergarten, then we get to go to first grade, and then we get to go to second grade, and then numbers keep getting higher, and we keep getting bigger, and the stakes keep getting larger as we go. So it's this, we've trained ourselves for this striving of material wealth or material possessions, if you will. Now, again, it's not about saying that, okay, then therefore we just lop it off and there's no more material stuff. That's not healthy either. The healthy thing is to recognize that we've grown in this way and then to counterbalance ourselves, to move ourselves into some awareness of that inner person, that inner drive to love and to connect. And to be us, to be authentic, right? So it's about finding that balance. I hope this all makes sense to y'all. I hope this is, I feel like I was kind of just hit the record button today, just just like let my mind go. But I hope it all kind of adds up to you. If you have any questions, as always, I welcome all questions that you might have. Please, please, please. I love to hear from you all. So if you have questions, you're welcome to leave them in the comments or to send me an email at art@artburnscoaching.com, whatever works for you. But I hope you enjoyed this today. I know I did. And again, it's about not so much thinking about all of this, but just practicing it. Okay, as we practice our mindfulness practices, which is just, any form of meditation, whether it's formal or informal, right? Which is just to say, focusing our attention, whether it's doing the dishes, cleaning the house, sitting with our eyes closed, walking outside, walking inside, drinking a glass of water, eating a meal, whatever it is, to focus our attention on that thing, on that object. And then when we find, and I do say when, not if, when we find that our attention has wandered off, we simply bring it back. Doing that over and over and over and over is going to lead you to this place of balance. You don't have to figure it out. It's about practicing to the point where you see it and you feel it. Likewise, practicing loving kindness, which is just, looking at people and just wishing for the wellness and just wishing for their happiness and just being that sort of presence of love and the loving care that is kindness. Practicing compassion when we see suffering in ourselves or others, we support that suffering. We come back to the presence of that suffering. All of these, each one of those practices that I just named 3, mindfulness, kindness, and compassion, attention, love, and support, if you will. It doesn't have to be mystical, right? But if we practice those, we find that balance. We don't have to look for it. We don't have to figure it out. We don't have to map it out. We don't have to make pros and con lists, and we don't have to ruminate about it for hours and hours and hours. It just naturally arises, like water finding its own level. Like, truly, that's what it is. It is just something that automatically comes to us because all we've been doing is we've done these practices is to focus and to cultivate an awareness of that which is not material in our lives. It's very, very simple. Very simple. And of course, as we do this, as the quote from Jung talks about, what we do is we reduce the inexplicable suffering that we feel. Right? Because if you recall, the suffering is really coming from the judgments. It's coming from the comparisons that we have, like, oh man, my car isn't as nice as that person's car, right? Or my clothes are not as nice as that person's clothes. Now I'm suffering, which is a form of attachment. Like, I'm attached to this idea that I'm supposed to be this certain way. That's where the suffering comes. And the suffering is also in the aversion of, no, I can't not be this rich or whatever, accumulate these goods and take this certain vacation and have this certain kind of job and have this certain kind of car and all that stuff. Right? So it's that clinging and that aversion and the judgment and the comparisons that we're making, that's where the suffering is. And so as we come inside and we honor that spiritual end of us, we honor that true nature of us, we can let go and we can accept and we can see things without judgment, see things with curiosity, and honor the experience that we're having, that it's not, my experience is not compared to anybody else's. The comparison is not what is important here. What's important is that I am me, and I'm loving me, and I'm allowing myself to be me. That's where happiness is. It's not in the car. It's not in the house. It's not in the new phone or the new pair of shoes or whatever it is that we think our happiness comes from. That's not where happiness comes from. That's where material satisfaction comes from. And there is some level of nice, good feeling that comes from that. And that's okay, right? To a certain degree, that's okay. Like I said, I love when I buy a new hockey stick. It's amazing. Hockey sticks now cost, there's some kids who are spending $400 for a hockey stick. I mean, that's not me. I buy the one on sale for like $100. Even that, I never thought I would spend $100 on a hockey stick, But I love it. It's what I do. It's my passion. It's the thing that where I find the sort of interface between the internal and the external. There's nothing wrong with it, right? And sure, I mean, maybe I want to make more money so I can buy the $400 hockey stick. Nothing wrong with that. As long as it's done in balance and integration with the rest of what's going on, especially that spiritual side of what's going on. But you could also look at it as like, not spending all your money on hockey equipment so you can't pay the rent, right? That's the same kind of thing, right? Like the finding that balance between the necessities and just the desires, because desire is just a form of attachment and clinging. All right. Hope you enjoyed this. Please let me know if there's anything that was unclear, if you have any questions of any kind, or if there's something that made you think about something today and you want me to talk about it more. Please, 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 I am here for you. All right, everybody. Wish you a wonderful day. I hope you're all experiencing the conditions for happiness, and I hope you're able to do some practice today. No matter how, even if it's just 1 minute of practice, that's the thing that the non-material, the spiritual you deserves it, even if that's all you can give it today. All right, everybody. Wish you well. Take care.